Welcome to Wines We Drink, a podcast for wine lovers and learners. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and together with my counterpart Keith Herndon, we'll be exploring a new wine each week. Keith is a lover of wine, and I'm a learner of wine, and we hope you'll sip along with us. Hello everyone, and welcome to Wines We Drink, our summer fun project where we open a bottle of wine and we talk about it. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Keith Herndon, who is our certified wine sommelier.
Charlotte, it's great to be with you today as we wrap up our 3-episode arc here at the Tapped Athens Wine Tasting Market. That crowd chatter you heard to open the show is all the evidence you need that this is a fun place to share a glass of wine.
Yes, a big shout out to Todd and Angela Hurt, the proprietors here. They've been such wonderful hosts over these past episodes and across all of our seasons. We sort of moved in and took over the place. So if you missed those shows, including our insightful interview with Todd, you can find them and all of our previous episodes from all 4 seasons on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We also have a complete episode guide at wineswedrink.com. So, Keith, where are we going today?
Charlotte, today we're going to enjoy a unique red blend. All I'll say about the location at the moment is it is from the Pacific Northwest, and I'll explain that mystery a bit later, right?
Okay.
I had this wine here at a special tasting hosted by Tapped, and from the very first glass, I knew it was going to be a selection for season 4.
Well, that's a quick decision for you then. I mean, I know how much you obsess over these selections you make for the show.
Well, we want to offer great tasting wines that represent great value. So when considering the price to quality ratio, I also like to feature wines that have great stories behind the bottle. So today's selections check all those boxes, starting with its taste.
Wow. Well, that sounds amazing. Let's get into some specifics then. Where or what are we drinking today?
I've opened a 2021 bottle labeled Triple Junction from California's Obsidian Wine Company. But this bottle needs some serious explanation before we start drinking it, right? The winemakers say it is a wine like no other, and I tend to agree with them.
Wow, a wine like no other. That's pretty bold. So I'm in.
Right.
Let's hear your serious explanation, Keith.
Well, let's start with the name of the winery, Obsidian Wine Company. It takes the name from a vineyard planted about 20 years ago on an old abandoned walnut orchard a half a mile in the sky in the Mayacamas Mountains. It didn't take them long to realize they were growing grapes in volcanic soil on a ridge of black obsidian glass.
A ridge of black obsidian glass?
Yeah, that's when the winemakers became enamored with their volcanic soils, and they wanted to make wines that accentuated this unique terroir. That brings us to the label, Triple Junction. This refers to the collision point of 3 tectonic plates that occurred in the Pacific Ocean millennia ago, and that was the genesis of a chain of volcanoes stretching northward from California through Oregon and into Washington. So leaning into their desire to make wines that express the volcanic soils that speak to the region, Obsidian found other wineries located on volcanic soils in Oregon and Washington and made this wine from grapes from 3 states, another play on the word triple.
Okay. I mean, wow. Color me impressed. This bottle is indeed a story about geology and geography as much as it is about wine.
Yeah, Charlotte, you're right about that. The bottle we're drinking is 50% from Obsidian's California vineyard and 32% from Washington's Red Mountain and 18% from the Echo West Ranch in Oregon.
Wow, okay, so a 3-state wine blend, truly a collaboration. I don't think I've ever had one of those before.
Probably not, but the story of this blend is only getting started, right? While the grapes are from 3 states, we haven't even talked about the varietals yet that are used in the blend, and there are 5 of them.
Wow.
Okay, 45% Cabernet Sauvignon, 18% Tempranillo, 17% Syrah, 15% Malbec, and 5% Petit Syrah. The Cabernet Sauvignon from Obsidian's estate vineyard forms the structure and the core of the blend. The Syrah and Malbec from Washington fill the blend with dense, rich, round fruit flavors, while the Tempranillo from Oregon weaves in spice and provides a savory character to the blend.
Well, this is certainly a concoction. I mean, 3 states, 5 grapes. How did they ever arrive at a blend that really works?
Well, I guess that's simply a testament to the skill of the winemakers who've been at this a long time and they know what they're doing, right? The principals here are Michael Terrian, Peter Molnar, and Arpad Molnar. Before Obsidian, Michael earned a degree in enology at UC Davis and made wine at Acacia and Hansel under some great mentors. Arpad has a business degree from Harvard, and Peter studied government and economics at Cornell, but they both grew up in the wine industry. They are the sons of the late Nicholas Molnar, a famous Napa Valley wine pioneer who founded the Poseidon Vineyards.
There's that play on triple again, right? 3 tectonic plates, 3 states, and now we have a power wine trio.
Right, you are. They are a power trio who understand they had something special in their estate mountain vineyard, and they're doing some special things to show the world how fantastic a wine can be when the grapes are grown in volcanic soils.
This is such a fascinating backstory. I mean, but not to cut to the chase here. I am ready to taste some wine. You've had this sitting in the decanter, and it's been beckoning to me since the start of the show, so I'm ready.
Okay, well, I'm going to pour some wine into our glasses from the decanter, and as I do so, please describe the color for our listeners.
All right. Oh, wow. It is deep. It is dark. It's an intense purple wine. Wow, look at that. Very opaque.
Yes. Knowing the blend of grapes that we discussed, this wine looks exactly as it should. Deep purple.
Okay.
And so let's go in for that first smell.
Okay. Wow. I mean, immediately you are greeted by all kind of spice. We'll call it, baking spices, I think is what we like to call it. A blend of kind of nutmeggy, cinnamony, and there's also kind of a hint of blackberry coming through that I kind of now associate with these deep, dark wines.
Yeah, those baking spice notes, to me give this a really pleasing aroma. It's like when I first tried this wine, I thought the first smells were going to be earthy and mushroomy, right?
Yeah.
A real savory wine, but it's much more subtle and fruit forward than I was expecting it to be. So now I kind of gave away some of that, right?
Yeah.
But let's go in for that first taste and
Okay.
tell me what flavors you're getting.
Wow. I'm tasting blackberry. There's also some cherry. I don't know, we can go with black cherry if we want to keep on the theme here.
Right. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So I'm also getting those black cherries, I think that's what gives this wine its vibrancy. But I love the juicy acid and what I'm going to describe as intense minerality. I mean, the reviews I've read attribute those characteristics directly to grapes grown in volcanic soil. So I think what we're tasting there is a direct expression of the terroir.
I mean, as I'm sipping here and you're talking and describing all that went into the production of this wine, I really totally agree about the acidity. What surprises me, though, is how smooth the finish is. It's really almost silky.
That's a great observation. As this wine finishes in your mouth, you get this transformation from fruit and acidity to smooth, earthy qualities, right? Mm-hmm. The winery's tasting notes highlight tobacco and cocoa powder as this wine's finishing flavors, and I think that adds a nice balance, if you will, to the fruit flavors. It just kind of brings it home.
Right, and the balance between those sort of baking flavors. You were talking about cocoa powder, we mentioned cinnamon and nutmeg, and I'm really also getting some vanilla qualities there too, balancing the savory notes with the tobacco. It's elegant. The finish is really complex.
Yeah, I agree. The wine also posts its alcohol by volume as 14.7%. That's up there, but it doesn't have any alcohol burn.
I agree. Yeah.
There's another unique feature to this wine. It was aged for 16 months in oak barrels, but not American or French oak. This wine was aged in 1 and 2 year old Hungarian oak barrels. So I'm going to come back to this later in the show, but for now, understand that this type of oak contributes significantly to its flavor profile, right? Now, I know you mentioned vanilla, right? But Hungarian oak is typically lower in vanilla compounds and relatively high in the compounds that provide herbal and spice components.
I mean, that it actually makes a lot of sense considering that the spice is very much more forward, and those vanilla cocoa powder things were more, like you were mentioning, on the finish. Could you really have found us a more complex wine to drink today? We've got so many things at play here. Volcanic soils, blends of blends of blends, and now a unique oak. I mean, I can't complain because it's delicious, but I'm betting you're going to tell me that this complex wine doesn't need complex foods?
Well, you know me well, right? While you're right about the complexity of the wine, it really comes off as just one of the guys, right? You know, it's perfectly at home hanging out at your pool party or your patio barbecue. You know, we do a lot of summer-themed wines here.
Of course.
And I think this is just another good patio barbecue wine.
It's flexible. I mean, that's another reason to like this wine.
Yes, I think the perfect pairing for this wine is a Swiss cheeseburger off the grill. And if you want to ramp up the umami factor, add some grilled mushrooms.
That sounds so delicious. You know, we've had burgers on the show before, but I'm not seeing any burgers here today, so I'm assuming that that's not what we're pairing it with. So I'm going to go with cheese. What cheese pairing do you have today?
Well, Charlotte, it's the Swiss burger without the burger.
Okay.
I have some wonderful sliced Swiss cheese there on a plate for you. So please enjoy the Swiss with this wine.
Well, it was a great sounding suggestion, so I'm going to have a bite and I'm going to have a sip.
Right. Yeah, I'll join you in that.
Please do.
You know, right?
You know, it's interesting because the Swiss cheese is pretty mellow as far as cheeses go, but that soft, fatty texture that you expect in Swiss, and then you've got the minerality and acidity of the wine. They're complementing, they're cutting through one another. It really makes it a simple yet really perfect pairing, and it works really well.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, this is a wine that would also work well with your meats on a charcuterie board, right? But I'm still planning this for my patio burger party when special guests like you are invited over.
Haha, I'm holding you to it. I mean, how much are you planning to spend, though, on guests like me? How much does a bottle of this Triple Junction cost? It seems like a lot went into it, so I have high expectations.
Well, this isn't a large production winery, and this is a unique niche wine, so our listeners may have to do some searching for it or order it online. When preparing for today's episode, I found it for between $25 and $35.
Okay.
But this wine has become much more popular since wine enthusiasts gave it a 93 rating in its May issue. You know, so anytime a wine gets that high of a score in one of the prominent wine publication, it starts to fly off the shelf.
Wow, that's some breaking news. I mean, I'm certainly happy that you snagged some for us while the 2021 vintage is still available. I mean, we really have a treat, and I've enjoyed it.
Well, yes, you know, I enjoyed it so much when it was featured at the tap tasting, I stocked up a bit.
Yeah, that's honestly smart. We've had a great time today talking about this complex blend of 5 varietals from 3 states. So where are you going to take this discussion during the finish of today's episode?
When we come back from the break, I'm going to be talking about barrels, okay? And not just any barrels, but special Hungarian barrels. Barrels unique to this winery and the wine that we drank today.
Okay, listeners, you heard Keith, so don't go far. We're going to come right back after a break to talk about barrels. Meanwhile, I'm going to have some more sips of this Triple Junction and bites of this wonderful Swiss cheese. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Wines We Drink. This is the portion of the show that we call the finish. Today, Keith wants to tell us more about barrels. Why barrels?
Well, the barrels used in the making of today's wine are unique to this winery, which I'll explain in a moment. But first, a primer, okay? Storing and aging wine in oak barrels has been part of the process for making many types of wine that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe as far back as the Romans who used wooden barrels to transport wine for the soldiers. Right? One of the key reasons we use it today, as Wine Folly explains, is that wood is porous and it allows the slow entry of oxygen, which makes wine taste smoother and less astringent or dry. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially with how surprisingly smooth this wine was today. It's high alcohol volume, but it's even with all of that considered, it's still pretty smooth.
Yeah, and the other reason that we use wood, right, especially oak, is it adds great flavors. Mm-hmm. You know, the wood has specific flavor compounds that are transferred to the wine and imparts all sorts of nuanced flavor characteristics. For example, oak has vanillin. Yes, that's the same compound in vanilla beans. It has lactone, which can contribute coconut notes, right?
Yeah.
And eugenol, which can add notes of spice and cloves.
So we often read in the tasting notes that the wine is aged in American or French oak. Why does that matter?
Well, great question. You know, these are two types of oaks that are most used. You know, American oak tends to impart more coconut, vanilla, and sweet spice flavors, while French oak contributes more savory spices and earthy flavors like dark chocolate and coffee beans, right? But here's why we're talking about barrels today. The wine we drank today, Triple Junction, was aged in oak for 16 months, but it wasn't American or French oak. It was Hungarian oak, as I briefly mentioned earlier, and that brings its own flavor profile to the wine.
I can't say that I've delved into Hungarian oak before. I mean, this wine just kind of keeps giving us some stories to talk about.
Well, absolutely, and it gets even more interesting and complicated, right? Obsidian Wine Company has its own cooperage, a barrel-making operation in Hungary with oak sourced from the famous Tokaj forest. The winery explains that it's the same species of oak as the French oak, but in this Hungarian forest, the trees are growing in volcanic soils. Yes, volcanic soils.
Right.
And they grow much slower, which makes the wood about 30% more dense with these super tight grains. That translates into low vanilla and high eugenol, which imparts more of those spicy notes, those baking spice notes that we talked about.
One trend with this wine is the obsession with detail, right? And it seems like these winemakers are also obsessed with volcanic soils, huh?
Yes, they are. When you're drinking Triple Junction, you are tasting terroir inherent in the Pacific Northwest's, ancient volcanoes and the soils that have now given us, right? Mm-hmm. But it's complemented by wood characteristics influenced by Europe's ancient volcanoes. And that makes for an incredible wine story. It's this marriage of New World and Old World brought together in unique way.
I mean, what a special treat that this wine really is. And this story, more importantly, really makes for an incredible bottle and a really fantastic finish for today's episode. What an awesome story. But what wine and stories will you regale us with next week?
Charlotte, I'm going to regale you with some of my wine travel stories again next week, right?
Good.
Last October, I spent a glorious weekend in southern British Columbia and participated in the grape harvest there.
Wow.
So we'll be drinking another fantastic red blend, but this one from north of the border.
Okay, well, I'm so looking forward to your harvest stories and another good bottle of wine. But before we go today, let's once again thank our friends Todd and Angela Hurt for being such great hosts. Today and our previous 2 episodes, we'll be returning back to the wine kitchen after this, but the Tapped Athens Wine Tasting Market is truly a special place to us.
Yeah, indeed it is. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Todd and Angela.
Until next week, cheers. Thanks for listening to Wines We Drink. Listen to our other episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Wines We Drink, and check out our episode guides at wineswedrink.com. Cheers.